I think, there's quite a number. And I think when we look at the sector, there's so many structural bottlenecks. But I think if we're to talk about people who are on the ground and actually doing the work, because we have a lot of post-harvest losses, I think that becomes the problem.
And our second question is, what are the structural constraints and bottlenecks holding African agriculture back? So we've talked about the constraints and some of the things that need to improve, whether it's financial support and how to improve the agriculture sector in general. But given your experience, it would be great to talk about your experiences and some of the setbacks and constraints that you believe might need to improve, or the solutions there. Wilber, happy to start with yourself.
Okay, straight into it.
Straight into it.
I think, there's quite a number. And I think when we look at the sector, there's so many structural bottlenecks. But I think if we're to talk about people who are on the ground and actually doing the work, because we have a lot of post-harvest losses, I think that becomes the problem. I think we talk about power infrastructure, being able to plug into some sort of a grid where you can be able to preserve some of your product. And I think that's where cold chain logistics is always a problem. The majority of farmers are facing this challenge because of the lack of power. So, looking at even logistics, being able to have trucks that are equipped and able to carry produce, keep it fresh and get it to the market or get it to where it's supposed to reach in the right quality, I think that becomes a big constraint. And I think when we look at the compliance levels that are required for export markets and for export products, that's where we start losing the value and we start losing what should get to the end user. So you'll find that if governments and private sector were to come together and possibly come up with some solutions that are centered around power, we know at the moment there's so many alternative power solutions that exist, but it's just making that deliberate, active investment in such frameworks, because it's obvious that the majority of our governments are failing to come up with a revitalization of the power grids that exist, corruption, challenges that have to do with funding, infrastructure that is old, that hasn't been maintained for a period of time. So obviously creating alternative solutions to that would be a big starting point. Being able to come up with green energy that is solar powered. I think Africa is one of the continents with the greatest amount of sunlight available. In some places there's quite a bit of hydro that can be used through turbines and windmill type of operations. And then obviously with a few projects that we're working on, there's quite a bit of biomass alternative power that is being used for rural areas where we have quite a bit of inputs that can be put into whatever structures that do exist. So for example, with preservation, there is a solution provider who has an invention and equipment that actually is solar powered and is able to not refrigerate the product, but preserve the product through some chemical reactions and ensure that the state of the product remains there for longer and it remains fresher. And I think that in itself becomes a starting point to be able to create any level of bottleneck breakages that would give the end user of that product and the pricing point of whatever you're selling the best optimization.
Amazing. No, amazing that there's so many points there, in particular in terms of transport and infrastructure. I noted so many crops that unfortunately go to waste, cassava in particular in Nigeria, that go to waste due to pure bad infrastructure or poor roading, just because, as you know, a lot of these crops expire very quickly. Reynard, if I could bring you in as well, one point I wanted to mention was maybe the lack of irrigation. So for those who don't know, that's the artificial watering of crops. It's much lower, and it's more in terms of workers directly working, more machinery work in Europe. Is that somewhere where we could improve as well in terms of improving that irrigation across agriculture sites?
Yeah, thanks, TJ. I think in terms of irrigation, we definitely need more investment there. If you think about the amount of capital that is needed to set up irrigation systems, because when you talk irrigation, you're talking water sources first, building canals that are able to transport that water to the fields. And you also need massive schemes to be massive investment to be able to do that, because you also need to do a significant amount of study to know where to get that water, where you're taking it, who is going to come, and what are the right machinery to use to pumping that water to the fields, and also how do you, and again, irrigation again also comes in with other packaging of infrastructure that is needed to set up that agriculture, irrigation system. You need roads for the contractors to bring in materials. So it's a whole circle of investment that is needed, not just buying simple pipes and setting drip irrigations or that kind of thing. Really, it takes a lot of effort to be able to do that. So I think the governments in Africa need to be intentional about it. They really need to go into it and stay there and really build those irrigation systems that exist elsewhere, like Israel or anywhere in the world, really. So my take is definitely we need more irrigation systems, but not just irrigation systems, but ones that are carefully designed, ones that will actually work. You don't want to set up canals that end up being just, canals that don't have anything transporting anything.
Sure, and just being inefficient. Yeah. And it kind of goes back to the funding, which you mentioned. And Renuka, obviously a person that's worked across the board. One thing that I find fascinating is that various banks and investors find agriculture at times to be quite risky as an entity as a whole. So I know obviously you've talked to various different entities, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. Yes, funding is risky there, like as people say, but I think with the right mindset change, we will be able to do it. What is needed is that we want to train and educate agriculturists or farmers that they are entrepreneurs. They have to take this daring and they have to take this responsibility of making the change. There is technology as alternate technology as well as irrigation or infrastructure. All designs are there. With the irrigation or water, I would say there are even local based in a sense of rain harvesting, small ponds, and many other alternatives are there. Solar bore pumps and many other alternatives which are very small investment actually. However, when we look at now I have some lenders or there are some investors, but still they don't believe in nature-based solutions, and agriculture comes into nature-based solutions. That is because agriculture or farmers have always believed that it is, if it rains or not rains, whether there is a production, no production, they believe that it is God gift. Yeah. They have never thought about science. They have not been taught science. And I think that is what we need. Mindset change, that you are an entrepreneur, not a family business, or not like just making a living out of it. And secondly, that they have to be given science, that arguments needs to be through science, and that is highly needed. Well, I am a technical advisor to Cocoa and Coffee Association Alliance of Africa, and I see that most cocoa raw beans are produced and they go to Netherlands or whatsoever, like Europe. Then the products come out and the whole world eat chocolate. Whereas the plants like chocolate making is nearly like impossible in Africa. Now we see people have changed, of course, but that is a very, very tiny amount. What we need is investment in processing units and value chain creation. Say for avocado, there should be avocado oil units and so on, because and also then we can, there are other forms like, as you said, biomass, but biochar and other things are also there which can help people get extra income, better fertility, and sequestrance of carbon. So I think mindset is the biggest one, education, awareness, and then making, I think at the same time, investors also need education. They need also an education how to mitigate it and how to offer these solutions to people. Thank you.
No, you're so right. Especially the mindset I find fascinating, just because if you do have that traditional mindset, it can be difficult to change as well, especially if it's religion, belief, or it's just the way in which you've been doing things for a while. So it is interesting. I feel that will take quite a bit of time, but also change the mindset of investors, right? We talked about it in the startup space, that the startup space in Africa is so different to the startup space in the West, and that investors need to change there. So I find that fascinating, but the problem is, obviously, this might take a bit of time. So what would you say is maybe the results? How long do you think this could maybe take? And as a result, do we see this happening maybe in the next decade or even later?
I think it's going to happen sooner than that, because I think where we are, it's a crossroads where we're starting to understand that Africa is important. There is another scramble for Africa as we speak, where people are jostling for resources and they're trying to find security for their own nations. China's trying to do that. The UAE, the Middle East, they're all trying to do that. Tracts of land are being bought by the US, by different countries, because they realize the importance of food security, sovereignty, making sure that you feed your people. And I think from an investment perspective, this is also a mindset that is changing. There was a time where we would invest in Africa possibly for extraction, but now you're starting to see a lot more people trying to see ways that they can invest in Africa for production, for manufacturing, for value addition. It's at a small scale, but I think the proof of concept needs to be pushed by the governments, by policy, policy that actually dictates that certain products cannot be extracted without value addition. And I think that becomes the talking point, where if a government or if private sector are serious enough to want a particular product like cocoa to become a chocolate, for coffee to become a coffee product, or for cashew nut to become something that can be put in a supermarket shelf, then there has to be investment in manufacturing. There has to be investment in packaging. There has to be education to teach people that if I'm producing this product for export, by the time I'm putting it in the ground and I'm putting pesticides in it, then there should be a thought process that makes me remember that by the time it gets to the port in Brussels or wherever, there's going to be a rejection of this product. So let me follow the process, have traceability, make sure that these little things that are important for trading and agriculture are put in place, infrastructure, power, preservation. And I think that mindset is quickly changing, because even the war that has happened in the Strait of Hormuz and in Iran, the bread baskets, Ukraine was doing a lot of product that was going to most of the world. That has made people realize that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. So Africa has become the focus again. So it will happen sooner rather than later, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we'll definitely touch on final goods and final products in our fourth question. So it's interesting to hear some feedback already. But Elizabeth, I'll start again with you as the virtual speaker. It'll be good to get your thoughts on some of the constraints that you've seen.
Thank you again, TJ. I agree that the bottleneck, or the key one, is the cold chain and the power infrastructure to run it. I would like to suggest a collaboration or scoping investments together with the bilateral development funds. The Danish one is now called Impact Fund Denmark, the Norwegian one, Norfund. These two particularly is eager to source new investment projects. They are focusing on Africa. Particularly the Norwegian one has a low expectations on the return on the investment, and they are in this game to facilitate development. They are also hard on the governance aspects, which is what was discussed about the governance challenges, which I think is an advantage in this case if you have some requirements along with the funding to overcome these governance challenges. It might be a good match. So that is my suggestion. Thank you very much for allowing me to comment again.
And Sarafina, I would love to get your thoughts on agriculture as well.
Sawa. Okay, the bottom line is that Africa has every reason to be a major agricultural powerhouse. Why? Because first of all, we have plenty of land. We possess truly massive stretches of land that we have every single reason to cultivate and farm. However, we are also currently discussing the implementation and integration of advanced modern technology. Right now, there is an incredible amount of modern technology available that can truly assist us. As I mentioned earlier, we have the implementation of AI tools like Nembe, which helps us determine the optimal times to harvest and when to plant our crops. Furthermore, we are witnessing the significant impact of mobile phone usage in our daily lives. Simply by using a mobile device, you're now able to conduct your business transactions. You are able to see exactly how the market is performing right now, and you are able to sell all of your crops simply by using your mobile phone. Furthermore, Wakita, we are witnessing significant improvements in education, and we are seeing a much more efficient use of both seeds and fertilizer. These fundamental factors bring significant power and potential to Africa, which is why we have such a compelling reason to farm. And furthermore, if I may add, if we remove the financial barriers to farming, meaning that if we support those small-scale farmers by providing subsidies, like I mentioned the government has done, but increasing them even more to attract young people. Because many young people, it's not that they don't want to farm, but if you ask a young person, they'll tell you, oh, just the seeds might cost maybe a million Tanzanian shillings, right? Then when it comes to the farm, maybe someone has to rent, then there's the tractor, then this and that. So when that person looks at it, they see it's a lot of money they're spending. It's better they do something else until they wait and they're still not sure about the rain. So it becomes a challenge, and it's not very encouraging. If the government or if Africa, if we help or if we empower young people or if we empower farmers, it brings positive results, or it creates a good situation where someone can be persuaded to take up farming.
Liking this video so far, please take a moment to give us a like, hype and subscribe, and don't forget to turn on your notifications so you never miss an update from us. For more deep dives and one-on-one interviews, you can listen to our podcast, The Afribond Sessions, either here on YouTube or on Spotify. On the Afribond Sessions, we speak with leaders and key stakeholders across Africa and the African diaspora to explore the business, the ideas and trends shaping the continent. You can also visit our website to learn more about the work we do at Afribond and our upcoming events.